Welcome to the last distinguished seminar of 2025. So thanks very much for coming. It's my pleasure to welcome Longfei Shangguan from the University of Pittsburgh. Longfei has a very long list of accolades from the short time he's been at Pitt. So he's an assistant professor at Pitt. He's also a visiting faculty researcher at Google, and he directs the PERG group at Pitt, which is the Pittsburgh Experimental Research Group.
Exactly.
And the work within that group is focused on a combination of next generation wireless, IoT, and mobile health. So I mentioned that he has a long list of accolades. So he's sort of collecting best paper and best paper runner-up awards like playing cards. So he's had 2 at Mobicom. He's had 1 at, I believe, at Ubicomp, at TrustComp,
Right.
and at Census as well. So these are amazing venues for the area. So really a delight to have you here today. I'm familiar with Longfei's work. I'm super excited to hear about it. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for inviting me first. My great pleasure to be here talking about some of our recent work on building these low-cost wearable devices. So indeed, I'm visiting Google, starting the last fall. So as a faculty visiting researcher, we are also building some health related stuff at Google by leveraging Gemini model behind. So, okay, here we go. Okay, yeah, so I want to start this talk with a quote from Tim Cook. So Tim one side, if you zoom out in the future and look back, asking what is Apple's the biggest contribution to the whole world, surprisingly, is on the health area. We know over the past years, Apple, which is known for its sleeker laptops, smartphones, smartwatch, right, has been quietly transitioning into one of the world's most successful health players. More surprisingly, is this not go through the clinical setup devices, it goes through something as simple as smartwatch, something millions of people are wearing every day. So this is fantastic, right? So essentially it gave us the indication that health is no longer a clinical stuff. It's more data-driven, it's wearable, it's lightweight. So, sorry, yeah. So look at this figure. So essentially, this is not a product timeline, but this is something we have been witnessing about Apple, decades ago, back to 2015, Apple Watch start tracking our fitness, start tracking our heart rate. Well, they are very simple features, but very refreshing, I'll say. And then 5 years later, back to 2020, Apple start tracking our sleep, right? Sleep quality, how long you slept, what's about your RAM activity, what about your deep sleep. And last year, Apple start tracking our hearing, right? Sensing our hearing capability. So all in all, you can see Apple is sort of positioning sort of a health tracker or health agent in our pockets, on our wrist, and also in our ear. This is very cool. But here's the question. Is this progress reaching all of us? In other words, does all of us benefit from Apple's health tracking features? So let's take a look at this product. So as you can see, there's a bunch of very fancy smartwatch, right? Apple Watch Series 10, Watch Ultra 2, and there are also some special editions. So look at this price. They cost $400, and some special editions can cost over $1,200. This is too expensive. Not everyone can afford it, right? So particularly for those people living in poverty, for those people living low-income families, these devices sound on another planet. Well, let's now take a look at this like, different words. So in United States, back to the rural areas, we can see only like 19% of people do have these kind of like health trackers. When it comes to urban areas, this number doubles. So this is essentially a wake-up call, like, telling us when designing health trackers, when designing some like, fitness trackers, we should not only care about how good it looks like, we should also care about whether everyone benefits. Now, let's move across the boundaries. So in Senegal, an African country, the monthly salary after tax is roughly like $360. When it moves to like United States, this number goes up to like 4,400. So this is a strong contrast. So now think about someone living in Dakar, the capital city of like Senegal, looking for an Apple Watch, which costs like $400. It's almost like an entire month income, right? How could he afford such an expensive, like, life-saving wearable devices? Right? So indeed, this. Do you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I was just telling.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, feel free to ask a question if you have. So indeed, this health inequity not only happens on the system cost, it also happens on the system or the technology itself. So suppose now we have like three, people wearing this smartwatch. One from, for example, Europe in like a white skin tone, some like Native American in sort of medium skin tone, and some like African American in dark skin tone. So this Apple Watch uses PPG sensor to sense our heart rate. But here's the key. Some studies have shown that these PPG sensors have bias reading on those people in dark skin. So it's more like, some technology seeing people in different ways and see someone more clearly than the others. So let's take a look here. As you can see, with the growing, in time, the PPG sensor reading, actually, the accuracy is going down slightly. So you may wonder why the PPG sensor gives you this kind of bias rating? Why PPG sensor, look at people in different ways? So let's take a look at how PPG sensor works. So the PPG sensor, I think if you have the wearable device, you may notice that they have the light source here, right? They're gonna shine a light to your blood vessel, detect these reflections to measure your heart rate. The problem is that for those people like in dark skin tones, their skins, their fat, their muscles have more melanin than people in lighter skin tones. So this melanin, they cannot absorb your the light coming from your PPG sensor. As a result, the reflect signal would be extremely weaker than those signal reflected from people in lighter skin tones.
Hello?
Oh, hey, Lena, question?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Go ahead.
we cannot hear it well. Like the sound goes up, comes and go. It's very hard for us to hear the ones who are in Zoom. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you.
So
Where's the microphone?
that is the microphone.
Oh, microphone's here, right?
Yeah, maybe you can get it closer to yourself.
Yeah, I tried to move it.
Oh, no worries.
I don't
Can you hear me more clearly now?
Now I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, I will get close to the microphone. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, let's continue. So now think about Tim Cook's talk, if we believe Apple's big bet is on the health domain, we should ask, who can benefit from this health innovation, these wearable devices, fancy stuff. So this question is actually at the heart of my talk today. So personally, I believe like, when building these wearable devices, we should build something not only for like nice looking, we should also build something for everyone, like, living in the whole world. So before we start, let's imagine like when you get aboard to the plane, usually you're gonna get free earphones, right? Like most of the time we use it once, we just throw it away, right? Or we left it in the drawer, right? Never use it again. So indeed, every day, the airplane, their companies, they gonna hand over millions of these earphones to the passengers. As I mentioned, often the time they just throw it away, use it in the airplane, right, or left it on the drawer. So essentially, millions of earphones every day essentially become sort of electronic waste, causing some sustainability issues, right? So, what if we can recycle these earphones? What if we can turn this electronic waste into a solution? We're gonna have multiple benefits, right? First of all, we can solve the sustainability issue, right? We can recycle all this electronic waste. On the other hand, we can build extremely cheap, wearable devices to track your everyday biomarkers, right? So this is actually what I've been looking into in the past few years. So on a high level, let me first give you an affirmative answer. Yes, we can do that. We can recycle this electronic waste. Why? Because we know like every heartbeat, our hearts or our every breath we take gonna generate these vibrations, right? This vibration is gonna propagate through our human body, arriving at our ear canal. So if you put on your earphone, we can essentially pick up these acoustic signals, right? It's more like, okay, using earphone not only for music playback, but also for heart rate monitoring or biomarker, picking up these biomarkers. The problem is that, back to those earphones we get on the airplane, they're ultra low cost. The thing is, they only have a speaker. They do not have an in-ear mic. So how could we pick up these key biomarkers? So to solve this problem, our idea is also very simple. It's actually inspired by some physics principles taught in high school, actually. We know the speaker was designed to playing sound, playing acoustic audios by turning this electrical signal into the audio signal. The tricky part here is that we know the same hardware can work in reciprocal way. So with the diaphragm, when the audio push the diaphragm, they're gonna generate electrical signal, right? In other words, the speaker can be used as a microphone to pick up all these key features, biomarkers. So that's a basic idea behind. So as we move into this research thread, here are at least a few key research questions that get us through this whole journey. First of all, the straightforward question came into our mind is, does this heartbeat, this biomarker signals in your ear canal strong enough to be picked up? Right? Do they provide similar level SNR, right? On par or similar to those medical devices? Likewise, right? Could we detect these biomarkers achieving similar on par performance with these medical grade devices? And also we know often the time when we want to pick up these signals, we are not picking up in a quiet room. Often the time there are ambient noise, right? And usually you may play some music. So can we detect these heartbeats, these biomarkers in the presence of this strong noise like music playback or ambient noise? So today I'm gonna follow these three questions, go over a few of my works in this domain to get you through. So before we start, let me first show you how weak the heartbeat signal we detect in the ear canal. So essentially, this figure shows the music signal. When you play the music signal, the signal strength roughly in hundreds of millivolts. Well, when you knocking on your earphones, it's gonna generate this kind of signal as tens of millivolts. But for the heartbeat on your right hand side, you can see this is at the sub-millivolts, strengths. So essentially, there are over 200 gap in their amplitude. In other words, if you have the music playing, your heartbeat's gonna be totally messed up, well, overwhelmed by this strong interference. So back to 2021, we started exploring this threat. So we proposed a system called the Hi-Fi, which was published in Modicon 2021. So this Hi-Fi is actually a smart, low-cost dongle. You can connect your everyday earphones into this smart dongle, and then connect this dongle to your parent device, like your smartphone. In this way, we actually turn your earphones into an active sensing device. So the key idea of Hi-Fi is trying to cancel the music interference using on the circuit level, using, I think most of you may be familiar with the circuit, now circuit called the Wisdom Bridge. So the Wisdom Bridge, is simple. So it was designed to measure the impedance of an unknown, the resistance of an unknown resistor, right? So it consists of two parts, the upper bridge and the lower bridge. So on the upper bridge, you have two identical resistors whose resistance are exactly the same. On the lower part, you have a unknown resistor you want to measure and the trim port, right? So how does the Wisdom Bridge works? So essentially, you're gonna tune this trim port until the output of this VG is 0. So once the VG's output is 0, it means that both the upper bridge and the lower bridge are well balanced. So in that case, the resistance of the trim port, showing on the trim port, is actually the resistance of this unknown CX, right? So in our system, our idea is simple. So let's just replace this lower bridge with our earphones. We know earphones have the left ear transducer, right ear transducer, right? So we know when the manufacturer produce these earphones, they are trying to optimize the impedance, their capacitor, their resistance of these two earphones to make sure they are well balanced, right? So that you get the best balanced user experience. So when you connect in your left transducer and right transducer on the C1 and CX, the VG, output of VG would be 0 because both the upper bridge and lower bridge are well balanced. So we further replace the power source here with the audio input. So we know when we play the audio signal, like the music, this audio V-in gonna change over time, right? But the problem is, the good thing is that no matter how you change this V-in, output of VG is always 0, as long as the upper bridge and the lower bridge are well balanced. In other words, the music would not affect the output of this Wisdom Bridge. The tricky part here is that we know when your heartbeat propagates through your body, they're gonna arriving at your left ear, right ear along two paths, right? So for most of the people, we know the heart is on the left side, right? So the path from your heart to your left ear is shorter than the path from your right ear to your heart, right? We know different lengths of your propagation path, so different attenuation. So when the signal propagates into these two ears, they change of this resistance gonna be different. So that's why now take into account of the heartbeat, the output of VG would not be zero. Essentially, the output of VG reflects our heartbeat patterns. And no matter how you play the music, it will not interfere the VG's output. So this is how we gonna take your heart rate readings in the presence of the music playback. We also have some signal processing module behind, but to save more time on the later parts of this talk, I will not go through that. Feel free to check our paper for details. So here, let me show you a demo. So essentially, you see our earphone connect to the dangle. Sorry. So when the dangle connect to the the laptop, so it actually shows the heartbeat signals. So essentially, this heartbeat signal reflect our heart rate, and when you compare it against the medical devices, we found their gap is very, very small. All right, I talked about how we use this very simple hardware.
Go back to the diagram of the second.
This one? Yeah.
So when the headphone is detecting the signal
Yes.
and there's the audio signal is coming,
Right.
then the signal that you take in VG is,
Yeah.
is basically somehow superposition of these two. I shouldn't say superposition, it's a function of both.
I see your point.
Just modulated perhaps by the V.
So the tricky here is that yes, when you're playing the music, this is a viewing audio, right?
Okay.
But the thing is, heartbeats, they cannot only affect the resistance on the left ear transducer, right ear transducer. No matter how much your audio signal being here changes over time. Exactly, it would not interfere. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. So very good question. So okay, so let's move on. All right, so I have shown you how we turn these everyday earphones into a health tracker, right? Monitoring the heart rate. Then, you want to move forward, you want to know, can we do more? Can we detect other biomarkers? Can we turning this earphone into a real health trackers? So starting 2022, early 2022, we started exploring, can we use the earphones to detect a PCG signal, which is also called the heart sound. So I think most of you are familiar with the clinical checkup, right? So when you go to see the doctor, they're gonna use a stethoscope, right? Hearing your heart sound, your lung function to detect there's some murmurs or there's some unnoticed patterns happening, right? So we are actually exploring, okay, can we, instead of using stethoscope, using earphones to detect it? So at least it can benefit in remote clinic visit setup. We know in the pandemic, most of us just visit doctors online, right, to keep the social distance, for example. The problem with the remote doctor visits is that they cannot take this kind of clinical examination, right? They cannot hear your heart sound. All the time they just listening to you and then give you some feedback. This is not that useful. So our idea is this, okay, if we can allow the doctor hearing your heart sounds through the internet, then they can give you more informed, effective diagnosis, right? So before we start, let's first take a look at the heartbeat signal collected from the earphone. So as you can see, while we can tell the heartbeat signal, right, roughly, and when you apply a cross correlation, you can accurately detect the heartbeat or heart rate for sure. But the problem, when you want to grab the detailed heart sound, essentially heart sound have more details. For example, the S1, S2 component, and sometimes the murmurs, right? But from this figure, you can hardly tell it, right? So why the heartbeat signal is so messy, so noisy? If we want to improve the signal quality to make it medical grade, hearable, we had to figure out why and then propose a solution to solve it, right? So we started exploring. So let's revisit this entire heartbeat propagation path. We know this heartbeat, signal gonna propagate through our human body, right? Arriving at the ear canal. So in this whole process, we're gonna lose some power, right? Due to signal attenuation and also reverberation, right? So as you said, signal gonna multipass, right? Imposed together at the ear canal. So when the signal arriving at the ear canal is already very weak, and we lost some high frequency components because the higher frequency you have, the more signal loss you have. And also this multipath like superposition, some frequency parts, particularly the high frequency parts, they're gonna be distorted. So when the heartbeat signal arriving at the ear canal, recall that we use a speaker as a microphone to pick it up. The thing is, when you use a speaker as a microphone, this speaker has a very low power transfer efficiency, which means that only a small portion of this energy gonna be absorbed, propagated through this audio cable all the way down to the parent device like smartphone, right? Most of them gonna be reflected back. So once the signal propagates through this wired cable, this audio cable, due to the impedance mismatch between your earphone and the smartphone. We know smartphone usually has a way larger impedance than your earphone. So due to this mismatch, similarly, most of the energy gonna be reflected back. Only a very, very weak copy gonna be further delivered to your parent device shows up. So that's why when you show up this signal on your parent device, you can see the signal is so noisy. You can hardly tell S1 and S2 peaks. So to solve the problem, we have to figure out how to improve the signal quality, right? So let's revisit all these three components. For the embodied channel, I would say we can do nothing, right? Because apparently we cannot put an amplifier inside the human body, right? Well, for the earphone interface, likewise, we can do nothing because we want to reuse all these speakers as a microphone. We don't want to break it. We do not want to make a change to their circuit. Otherwise, why not build a new health tracker in the form of in the form factor of earphone, right? So if we want to reuse the earphone as a health tracker, we should not touch their hardware. So our only hope is actually on the impedance mismatch. So if we can well balance their impedance, we can make sure most of the energy can be delivered to the parent device, right? So to better understand how this system works, let's just build a simple model to model it. So we have the parent device, the smartphone. We have the earphone, right? So we use the ZS to represent impedance of the smartphone. We have the ZE as impedance of the earphone. The delta Z is actually the impedance variation caused by your cardiac activities. So recall that since ZE here is not equal to ZS, so when most of the energy heartbeat goes through the cable arriving at the smartphone, you see, most of the energy gonna be reflected back, right? Only part of that gonna be absorbed. So idea is simple. Let's add another part, VP. Okay, so that VE plus VP equals this, right? Once you well balance these devices, these two impedance, then most of the energy gonna go through the cable, go through the connector, arriving as a parent device, right? It's simple. But the tricky part is that we know different earphone, different parent device, they have significant different impedance, right? We have to make it automatic, right? We should not tune it offline. So we build this kind of hardware. So I will highlight a few parts here. So it's actually composed of a few key parts like a digital trim port. So we have an algorithm here to automatically tune this trim port to balance the impedance between the earphone and any kind of pairing device. Also have this coupling, AC coupling. It serves as a high pass filter to filter out those DC offsets, this low variant DC offset. Also have an 126. This is a differential amplifier trying to amplify the signal strength once we get it. Let me show. So let me first show with this new hardware how the signal now looks like. It now becomes way clearer than the one we collected before. Right. So, with this new hardware, we significantly improve the signal quality, SNR, and we can even tell the S1 and S2 peak from the raw signals. But still, there's a problem. Let's compare the signal waveform between those collected by the digital stethoscope on the upper part and our recovered hertz sound from the ear canal using earphones. You can see although we show both S1 and S2, but some of the high frequency components is missing. So when we're listening to this recovered hertz sound from ear canal, you sound very weird sounds. We send it to the cardiologist. They cannot tell what's going on here. What is that? So what's happening? It's actually because when the signal propagates through your human body, high frequency component gets lost, distorted. Because as I mentioned, signal goes through the body. The higher frequency you have, the more attenuation you're gonna experience, right? And also multipass effect. They're gonna distort it on the high frequency part. So to solve this problem, we propose this end-to-end signal processing algorithm. So the first step is on the hardware. This is the impedance matching I have briefly mentioning about. So essentially, we do tune this impedance matching to make sure we can best capture the hertz sound from the hardware. And then we pass it through the pre-processing and but it cannot cure or it cannot solve the fundamental problem. And then we carefully segment each heartbeat cycle by leveraging a hidden Markov HMM model. So with that, we're gonna get a bunch of these heartbeat cycles with a clear boundary. Then our next step is to trying to recover those missing high frequency parts, those distorted high frequency parts. So we use deep learning. So the input is actually the heartbeat cycle, and we have the encoder-decoder architecture trying to recover the spectrogram, the missing spectrogram. And after that, we're gonna transform it back to the time domain inverse FFT. So this is the results showing on the bottom is a recovered spectrogram compared to the input signal without the recovery. You see, we have more details on the high frequency components. But when we start playing this hertz sound, it's still not idle. Sometimes we hear some glitch, sometimes we hear some weird sound happening. So why? because the frequency, the spectrogram recovered only handles the spectrogram. It does not handle the phase. So when we transform it back to the time domain, there are some phase discontinuity. We know this phase discontinuity gonna bring in some inconsistent group delay. So that's why we can hear some random noise happening, which stop us from from the stop those clinicians, stop those cardiologists to make a fire diagnosis. So that's why we have our last phase, waveform refinement. Likewise, we still use the encoder decoder architecture. It's lightweight, and also it has showing their superiority in many different downstream applications. But here we are essentially do it on the time domain. We carefully recover the phase. We're trying to align the phase. So finally,
one question.
Sure.
So, if the high frequency, I'm not completely familiar with
Sure.
EKG or
Yeah.
related so if there is a high frequency component,
Yeah.
That has also that always come with a low frequency component. You see low frequency, you attach reconstruct the high frequency at them.
Yeah.
But if there is a signal in the part that is only high frequency and is completely lost,
I think
then it's lost,
exactly.
right?
I agree.
Is there any signal like that or no?
Right. That's a very good point. So the tricky part for audio is that usually we have harmonics, right?
Okay.
So if you have high frequency, usually you have some very sparse, harmonics on the low frequency part. So my understanding here, why the deep learning algorithm works here is that it can take this low frequency, very sparse harmonics as an indicator to guess what is happening, what is lost on the high frequency part. So I cannot tell why the high frequency is totally lost, and then the low frequency there's no harmonics. If there's no harmonics on the low frequency band, I do believe deep learning could not recover.
There is also the question of uniqueness.
Mhm.
If one high frequency or low frequency component can be connected to two different forms of high frequency.
I see. I think that's a one-one matching.
Okay, so that's okay,
Yeah,
that's-
yeah. This harmonics, they are actually follow the same pattern. It's just a matter of fact, different frequency band.
I see.
Yeah.
So, sorry, interrupting.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Why not measuring the impulse response of the body in terms of frequency
Somebody. Okay.
to here?
Yeah.
And then deconvolve.
Deconvolve, right. That's a good point. Let me see.
Instead of deep learning.
True. Then the tricky part is if you want to measure the frequency response or channel response from your heart to your ear canal, you have to sort of put a transmitter somewhere on your body with a known signal pattern to measure the channel, right? But you see, if you want to really measure the real channel between the heart and your ear canal, it's really hard to put the transmitter as close to the heart as possible, right?
But how is this autoencoder is trained? Maybe can we elaborate a bit on that? How do you recover? How does the network will recover something that you cannot know it exists, right? So is there a training set that you are using?
We are using the heart sound, collecting from your heart using the decibels.
Oh, okay.
Branches.
So you can use that again. To be honest with you, one challenge that I see with the impulse response, that you limit yourself to a linear system. But here with deep learning can go to non-linearity. But it seems that if you go to higher orders, maybe you can make them harder. Just measure that a few times.
Right.
Even the system doesn't adapt for every single person.
Right.
You don't train this for every single person. Is it customized for each person?
Right. So basically, when we train the model, we collect data from 30 people, and essentially take into account different, frequency response of your body, something like that. But you make a good point. So let me so a bit clarify. So what I'm worried here is that we cannot entirely accurately measure the channel response unless you're sending a known signal pattern from the parts to your ear canal, right? Because we cannot directly using your heartbeat signal as a signal to measure your channel. Because the heartbeat it varies, from people to people. I don't know if you get my point.
Then actually it becomes the same question here about the generalization of this deep learning.
Yeah.
Like how good is the generalization?
Right.
Because if you're using 30 people, sure.
Right.
But then next 30 people, are they close to the first one?
Yeah, I agree with you. This is always the problem with the deep learning, how to scale it up, right? So I agree with you. So
Also, how do you detect anomaly in the high frequency response? I mean, the system is incapable. It seems capable of detecting anomaly. It can add some normal high frequency response, but how about anomaly?
So I will later on show you how the anomaly signal looks like, recovered by our signal. So on the high level, as I mentioned, even you have the high frequency anomaly like the murmurs, they do have a harmonic in the lower frequency band. So this signal can be detected. So the deep learning model gonna take this as a clue to recover the high frequency components here. Yeah.
You say so.
Right. This is how the results looks like, right? Shows you. So, but I agree with you. Scalability is always a concern on deep learning stuff. So we actually collect data from 30 people. Apart from that, we are also using the public data set trying to scale. There's a public data set, but the problem is how we use them as a ground truth. So essentially, we are emulating, in-body channel by sort of a pork belly with some transducer on the one side, propagating a signal, earphone on the other side, trying to climb.
I think the question that I was asking is, if there's abnormality that happens only in the high frequency signal, which doesn't have any reflection in the low frequency components that you require. And let's go back to the question of uniqueness. If low frequency signal has a unique high frequency component.
Yeah, that's true. If there is no indication on the low frequency part of the deep learning model, definitely should fail. Otherwise, there's no clue how come it's recovered.
Yeah, similar question.
Right.
This model use the same person, right? The same person with ground truth to recover high frequency, right? That's very limited because everyone has different. Different frequency, different characteristic of signals, and if you miss any of those specific person's characteristic, then you cannot generalize. Right. And that's one. Second one, if it's not there, can I recover? Right. If you use low frequency Q to recover high frequency signal, that's assume that the correlation is clear.
Right.
If the correlation is weak, whether you recover most likely would be so-called average performance, not necessarily for that particular, the person you want to identify, right?
I totally agree. I mean, so I agree with you upon the scalability. So let me briefly explain this, using low frequency to recover high frequency a little bit. So we know, our human body, most of our parts are nonlinear. So essentially, when signal propagates, due to this nonlinearity, you're gonna get the harmonics on both the high frequency parts and low frequency parts, right? So back to the question. So first of all, there are definitely some cases both the high frequency and low frequency of these murmurs that disappear. In this case, I do believe deep learning gonna lose their power to recover because there's no clue, right? But based on what we measured on both human being and also the emulation based on the pork belly, with some of those low frequency parts, although they are still there, it could be some mixture of this harmonic, something of the high frequency part and also some intrinsic low frequency part. That's true. But yeah, I mean, I really cannot tell, the fundamental physics principle, it's work here, but that's my best understanding, they can best leverage this tool to recover this That's also a limitation of deep learning.
The problem is that it's very hard to say to doctors. You only use patterns, right? You don't have any physical equations to back up those things. Using patterns, and those patterns are very hard to explain.
I totally agree.
Very
So
hard
that's
to
why,
say
like,
to doctors.
back to this project, we are calling like exploring the feasibility of like person recovery using earphone. We never say this is like something awesome, clinical great, something like that, right? But later on, I will play some like audio clips you can hear, and also we did actually a blind testing with 5 cardiologists. Let me show you briefly. So first, I will show you this like healthy heart sound recovered by our system. So I think we do have the sound, right? Playing.
Yes.
Okay.
How about using mouse to click that?
Yeah, can I use a? Yeah, can you just play the first one? So this is the signal recovered by our system, and then ground truth. Next one. Can you play it again? Yeah, so they are quite similar. Essentially, we are comparing their like mean square. The error is below like 3%. So let me next show you like the pathological first sounds. Yeah, can you play again? First is the. So this is the murmurs recovery on high frequency band. So this is the murmurs of the ground truth. Play again. Yeah, so when we're testing it, we actually, for example, 30 people, we use 25 as a training, the other 5, like the model never see as a testing. So we never use the same person as a training and testing for sure. Okay. Okay, cool. So yeah, as I mentioned, we also do this kind of like blind testing with the 5 cardiologists. So what we do here is like, okay, we shuffle 50 copies from our device, 50 copies from the ground truth, which is a digital stethoscope. So we send it to cardiologists. So cardiology have no clue about which is which. They are required to do the diagnosis based on the heart sound they heard. So look at here, actually the performance on these 2 type of heart sound, they are quite similar, right? Across both healthy, like something wrong go with S1, S2 peaks, something wrong with murmurs, and sometimes it also shows up S3 and S4 peaks. So yeah, quite close. So indeed, you can see here, particularly on the murmurs, our system achieves a slightly higher performance than the standard stethoscope. So we talked to the cardiologists that they told us they always hear something like the murmurs way louder than the signals collected by the stethoscope. So that's why this makes them easy to figure out, oh, there's some murmurs, you should check out for further diagnosis. All right, I have talked about how we turn this everyday earphone into from heart rate monitoring device to heart sound recovery devices. And recently, we also collaborate with UMass Amherst and UMBC, Maryland, Baltimore County. So essentially, we are using everyday earphone to monitor your pulse wave velocity. So pulse wave velocity is also a very important biomarkers, indicates the stiffness of your blood vessel. So in conventional setups, so you have to go to the doctor, lying down, putting on these dedicated devices, one on your arm or your wrist, another on your neck. So the principle for measuring pulse velocity is simple. As long as we know the distance between your arm and your neck, then you detect the pulse on these 2 sides. We know the time difference, we know the distance. You can compute the velocity, right? Simple principle. So this motivates us to see, okay, can we use earphone to do that? Because earphone has 2 transducers, right? So what we do is like, okay, we put one earbud like, on your wrist, one earbud is on your neck. So when the blood flows through your blood vessel, there's a slight deformations, right? So what we do here is we send in the ultrasound to detect this tiny vibration, tiny like in deformations. So this is a signal we detect it. Of course, you have to like keep stable, right? Not moving, right? And so you can see the signal pattern is still quite clear. With that, we can essentially measure your pathway velocity. Okay, that's the basic idea behind, and I will not touch upon the details, but feel free to check our paper. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about the technique part, right? So to me, I think research is not only pushing the boundary of knowledge, it should also about pushing more people to the boundary of the knowledge. So with that, early this year, I take my team flying to Senegal, the African country. So we start deploying our system. We want to know how this system helps the local community. We want to take license. We want to refine our system. So here are a few takeaways. So essentially, we found this wearable health tracker is quite important to their local communities. So sometimes, most of them are Muslims, right? They have a lot of rules, right? So you cannot touch their body or something like that for clinical diagnosis. And we found that actually when you put on your earphone to detect your heart rate, something like that, it can go through scarf, right? You're wearing a scarf, signal can still go through to detect it, friendly, quietly. On the other hand, we also visited a few local villages in Senegal. We found, okay, so our system can serve as a pre-screening tool, detect these vital signs. In the meantime, they're also in urgent need of nurse or physician. So we visited 4 villages in Senegal. We found usually 2 villages sharing just a single clinician or nurse. This nurse all the time have very limited medical training. So often the time, even you gave them the biomarkers, like what's your heart rate, blood pressure, something like, they cannot give a very informative diagnosis. So notice that when we came back, we start designing our next generation of these wearable devices. In particularly, we are trying to build an AI engine staying on the board, trying to help the local community interpret what's the meaning of this heart rate, what's the meaning of this blood pressure, so on and so forth. Right. So early last month, we got the local IRB approved. So our local community collaborator just got a bunch of our devices, new devices there. So currently we are collaborating with their medical booth, trying to deploy 5 type of systems in their local community, trying to see how would it help the local community. So yeah, with that, I want to wrap up my talk. Happy to take any question. Thank you. My student taken at Senegal, I really like it. I mean, yeah, so it's a free food we got. I think yeah.
Longfei, actually, before we open it to questions, so first, thanks for an excellent talk.
Sure.
Would you mind giving maybe just a 2-minute overview of the work that your team has done in gesture reconstruction?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah. So, right. So essentially, this is something we are using earbuds to detect signal inside out, right? Inside your body, out. We want to take it out. Essentially, these earphones can be used in outside-in manner. So most of the, not most, some of our earphone, active noise cancellation earphone, it has a microphone facing outwards, right? I didn't bring mine, but yeah. So essentially, when you're listening to music, this music gonna leak out from your earphone. So when you are performing some gestures, you see the signal gonna reflect off your hand and then captured by your the outside earphone, which is called the feed-forward microphone. So this is essentially a sonar system, right? So when you're performing gestures, the sonar system gonna detect how your gesture looks like, right? We have signal processing module to show how it works. Actually, I have some demos. I don't know, like I can send it to you to show, or if you have time. I mean, I don't know if we have limited
So I
time.
think we have limited time just to keep everything on schedule, so we'll open it to questions, but it would be awesome if you share those videos. We'll share them with the group.
Sure.
I've seen the demos. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Quick question. Your laptop or your phone has a microphone and a speaker. Could
Yes.
you use that as a radar to replace that? Because in every kid in Senegal there was a laptop up front, right? So they could use the laptop to record all this data, right?
Exactly. So the figure I show here, essentially, yes, we do have our own laptop to show how it works. But for the road deployment, we never have a laptop because they do not have that right.
Okay.
So even most of them do not have a smartphone. So that's why, like, we using this wasted earphone as a sensor. So back to your question, can we use a smartphone to detect? Oh, sure, we can. For example, we facing the microphone towards your heart, get close as possible, right? We can detect the heartbeat for sure, right? This could be used in our in well-developed countries. Everyone have this kind of smartphone for this local community.
So the idea is that the data will be stored on board the device over time, and the user will need to have a smartphone though, so that
They do now. This device is gonna be deployed in the clinics, like their local community. People go to see the doctor, they're gonna use this device to diagnose it.
So the last prototype doesn't get the jack connected to the phone.
Right. We have the big screen connect to this board showing up on the screen.
Okay.
It now goes to the
Good. I missed that.
smartphone.
Thanks.
Right. 'Cause most of them, as I mentioned, they do not have the
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so how much is associated hardware cost?
Right. So yeah, that's a good point. So earphone, great, right? We actually recycle it from trash bins, right? In the airport, we actually grab some from the trash bin indeed. So I mean, yeah, it is a truth, unfortunately. So we're trying to talk to some airports, can you give us some of these? We're trying to use this as a health tracker. They say, really? Okay, yeah, forget it. So, and then we have this hardware, right? The hardware is very cheap. As I mentioned, it's roughly three-ish when you producing in scale. For example, 1,000. We produce it in Shenzhen, China. PCB board called Jialichuang is a very big fab. So, and then the latest version with the AI capability. So I cannot remember the correct number. It's roughly at tens of dollars, $20, $30. It's just a microcontroller and then a screen with Android harvester.
Right. So an EKG device, right, affiliated with the iPhone is about what, $70?
Yes, I agree. Then the thing is, as you see, so the problem is it can't detect it. It cannot analyze data, right? So in the latest version we produced, we have the air capability deployed there, costs tens of dollars. It will directly tell you what the meaning of these ratings there, right? The overall end-to-end cost is tens of $20, $30 like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very nice work, by the way.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I think we are out of time. Sure. Very good.